If one US state had to be split into two or more states, which would you pick and why? The scenario is pretty simple. One among the 50 US states has to be split into two or more separate states, and you have to pick which one. Which state do you pick to split up, why do you pick that state, and how geographically do you cut it up? No wrong answers here. California, the North and South don't even feel like the same state. It is massive and has the highest population out of all of our states. They have actually tried to do this already a long time ago, but a war kind of put it on the back burner. If I had to pick a second state, it would be Texas for mostly the same reasons. It would have to do by population. I mean, North and South Dakota should be just one state, barely anybody lives there. Rhode Island, just for the absurdity of it and to see various groups think they're going to be able to take over each tiny state. South Dakota and North Dakota should have never been split latitudinally but east and west. The east side of both states is farmers. The west side is ranchers. They have nothing in common with each other. Lop of West ND and give it to Montana, and lop West SD and give it to Wyoming. Give East ND SD to Minnesota. Boom, two fewer states. West Virginia. Split west-east, so now there's a East Virginia that's west of Virginia, as well as a West Virginia that still doesn't extend further west than Virginia itself. The most obvious, geographically, would be Michigan. But that would be a horrible idea for the up. Believe me, I was raised there and still visit family. Upper Michigan would instantly become Florida North without Detroit, Lansing, and Grand Rapids. I'd carve out a little from Maryland, and a little from Virginia right about the mouth of the Potomac River. I'd call that state Washington, D.C., give it an actual voting senator and congresspersons. I'm gonna go with the opposite and say that North Dakota and South Dakota just need to get married. Also Wyoming, Montana, and Idaho should have a three-way. Utah can look wantingly. California. Simply because the massive size of their electoral college vote. I'd divide the state up into north and south at whatever latitude and following existing county lines that would give them roughly an equal population. Texas, West Texas, and East Texas, then the two Dakotas have to become just Dakota. Make DC Puerto Rico states while we're at it. Some states are way too big and thus receive disproportionately small representation, which is unfair. Split California into two. Split Texas into two. And while we're at it, let's join underpopulated states. Combine the Dakotas. Wyoming needs to join either Montana or Idaho or even both. Vermont joins New Hampshire. If the US is going to add more states, it has to be done in a way that does not mess up the symmetry of the stars on the flag. Priorities. Tennessee. Middle Tennessee, specifically just Davidson Company and Williamson Company, pays 50% of all taxes for the state of Tennessee. GDP is similar. A canal curling through Rhode Island could create a true Rhode Island and then a road mainland. That'd be much better. To be honest, I would do the opposite and join a lot of states together. Like a lot of states. If it were me, my first choice would probably be New York. I'm not native to the state, but it seems like too often in discussions about the state that it's always about the city and the rest of the state seems neglected. But, if made NYC one state and the rest into another state, you'd have complaints of doing it just for the sake of benefiting Republicans in the Senate. The solution to the TMO would be also making DC a state, which would in turn kill two birds with one stone, since most data suggests that DC residents want to become their own state. No, thanks. The primary reason that a few western states have small movements to split off rural areas into separate states is simply to create still more empty states with two senators each, to bolster the GOP's deeply unfair advantage in Congress and presidential elections. 2/3 of Americans now live in just 15 urban states where their votes are severely devalued by the obsolete US Constitution. These people need more representation, not less. One person, one equal vote. California into three parts with San Francisco, Los Angeles, and San Diego as capitals. Screw Sacramento. California. By far. For one, their massive economy dictates a lot of political decision-making, and the largely blue cities on the coast decide legislation for the rest of the largely red state. I'd say California due to its massive size geographically, GDP, and population. However, every proposal I've seen conveniently leaves at least one very large, Democrat-heavy, city in each state, with like 5 new states being created, making it an obvious attempt to gerrymander states and the Senate and generate like 6-8 more solid states with Democrat senators. Number 2 would be New York, where the city, and some of the surrounding areas, break off into its own city-state. California obvious, but also Washington state. East of the Cascades is conservative. Montana split down the eastern side of the Rockies. The flatter, more agricultural eastern half of the state economically is very different than the more mountainous western side. I think the obvious choice is California. However, the state in general, northern and southern, have similar politics. I would choose somewhere where there is a huge political divide to change that particular state for what its goals are. If I'm allowed to split it up, California. If it has to be split urban-rural, Texas. If it's completely random, Vermont. That should maximize the chances of adding Democratic senators. CT, or any small pretty liberal state. Make more small liberal states and plug our ears while yelling the Senate protects the interests of the individual states, the House is for the people, and watch conservative heads explode. Maybe then our broken government can get fixed, Senate reformed or abolished, Electoral College nuked, etc. Texas. Divide the state into 5 smaller states. Over a period of years allow Mexico to re-annex the 5 states, but it would be conditional on Mexico also taking the Texicans in that state. Texas would no longer be part of the Union, and all those ignorant Texicans would be Mexico's problem. A major win for American democracy. Now let's talk about Florida being returned to Cuba or Haiti. California. The state has a huge red population that has no say in how their state is run. I believe they have the 2nd or 3rd largest Repub voter group by state and get almost 0 representation. If it's only going to be one, then I'd split Texas because it'd hurt the psychotic GOP, leaving one sparsely populated red state like Wyoming and another densely populated blue state that would have a lot more electoral votes. If just Texas split, Republicans wouldn't win the presidency for a generation at least. We really should set a maximum state population of like 10 million. Any state over that gets split up. So Florida and Texas in 3 and Cali into 4. It should also have a minimum state population of 1 million, so ND, ST, Alaska, Wyoming, and Vermont all need buddies. No, Wyoming is not a typo. Rejoin the Dakotas. Split California into 3. Add Puerto Rico and DC. Split Texas into East-West. I would split Cali, Texas, New York, and Florida. I would also combine North-South Dakota and Montana-Idaho. I would also add Puerto Rico and DC as states. Total 56 states all said and done. NY. NYC and surrounding burbs versus NY state. X200B. And break Cali into 2 or 3 pieces. Get rid of Rhode and Delaware. Split California into 700 new states, just so we can stop pretending that the Senate and Electoral College aren't fundamentally tyrannical institutions. None. We need to combine the Dakotas, combine Wyoming, Montana, and give Puerto Rico, Washington, D.C. full representation and voting power in the House Senate. North Dakota should be split into 2, so there's North Dakota, Middle Dakota, and South Dakota. California or NY because they've got such a huge divide between the urban populations of 1-3 metros and the rest of their state. On the right side of the aisle, Texas and Florida are much more consistent. Texas at the moment being mostly purple and Florida being more red.